Great-Grandpa Eustice liberated Italian immigrants from a small-town mafia family. Guys, when I tell you this is a crazy story, this story is based in the 1920s about a great-grandpa named Eustice, who was an American immigrant who got crossed into some wild stuff. Here's his story. Eustice William Landry. In early 1920s, some may have known him as one of the wildest, unpredictable, heroic men they've ever crossed paths with. To me, he was flesh and blood. An old ancestor that I never had the privilege of meeting. After all, the stories I've heard regarding him since I was a kid, he was always someone I wished I could have met. I was probably only 7 or 8 the first time my dad told me about my great-grandfather. His name was Eustice, and he lived on a massive farm out west, somewhere in the foothills of Colorado, far, far from any cities or large towns. The stories were nothing amazing, really. He lived in a tiny cabin with his wife, Delia. And even though their living quarters were quite small, they owned over 100 acres of land. I remember my dad used to complain all the time because the land was supposed to go to my grandfather, then to my father, and then eventually to me. But due to fraudulent signatures on some papers or something after Eustice passed away, the entire estate became the property of the bank. Or so I was told at the time. I remember my dad saying there wasn't anything my grandfather could have done to get the property from the bank after Eustice died. Even though Delia was still alive and living in a retirement home by that point, the property no longer belonged to my family. My dad was 6 when Eustice passed away, so I don't doubt he did not know the truth about the property at the time. Delia lived quite a bit longer, but her health deteriorated quickly, and her memory slowly faded away with it. I was pretty sure my old man was just particularly bitter about it, because today he's the patriarch of the family of 4, and we live in a townhouse on a 1/2 acre lot. Needless to say, that land would have been great to have. The truth about Eustice and his wild days did not fall upon my ears until I was 12. We were at a family reunion, and one of the older cousins was asking my grandfather a barrage of questions about growing up in the early 1900s, and through this conversation, she let it slip about how Eustice and Delia ended up with over 1 acres of prime farming land. "Oh, old Eustice had that Mafia money from taking all those old jobs," she said. We'd soon realized that her story also made sense as to why the bank probably ended up with the property in the end. Initially, she tried to pass over the details, but I think because of the amount of interest my cousin and I showed in learning about old great-grandpa Eustice, she decided to tell us the entire story. In a warm, sunny day in eastern New York, sometime around the end of August 1920, when a boat docked at the port, coming from Europe. The boat was full of immigrants and people escaping unideal living situations, ready to try their hand at pursuing the American dream. Among them was good old Eustice. Eustice and Delia had met in Germany in the late 1800s, and were inseparable ever since. When they migrated to the States, they were already a well-established couple, even though the legalities of marriage were still a few years away for the lovebirds. They weren't necessarily fleeing a turbulent life, as much as they were looking to lay down roots and start a family in the great land of America. However, this was far easier said than done, as jobs were plentiful, but the pay, not as much. Fresh off the boat, Eustice and Delia stood there. Nowhere to go, nobody to ask for help, no plan of action. It was an eye-opening experience that they may have bitten off more than they could chew. It did not take long before they partied up with a few other immigrants who were in a similar situation. The small group gathered around an old dilapidated warehouse that appeared to still be in use despite its heavily damaged appearance. It did not take long for this small group to turn it into a gathering of over 24 immigrants, also fresh off the ship. And to make matters worse, nearly all of them did not speak a lick of English. Thankfully, due to some missionary work back in Germany, Eustice and Delia knew enough to get around. Nearly an hour passed and some well-dressed men showed up. The first few started at the far end of the line and began asking questions. Even though the immigrants did not understand what they were saying, the men had items with them to insinuate their business.
"Ah, can you fish?"
one of them asked, holding up a small fishing crate.
"Looking for farm work?"
another asked, handing over a flyer for his dairy farm.
"Oh, you look strong,"
one said while squeezing the muscle of a teenage boy in a torn shirt.
"Come with me. I have some work for you in the loading warehouse across town."
As the day went on, the number dwindled, but not quickly. A lot of immigrants were passed over due to their age or lack of noticeable qualities. However, just before the sun set, a well-dressed man in an expensive-looking outfit approached Eustice and Delia. He was wearing a dark blue suit with a matching derby. He was a little on the heavy side and had a sausage-sized cigar hanging out of his mouth. With him were two other guys, wearing matching gray pinstripe suits. One had on a white undershirt with a red tie, while the other had a black undershirt with a blue tie. Their hair slicked back, and they stood well behind Vincent, donning blank stares.
"Parle Italiano,"
he grumbled.
"Non proprio,"
Eustice answered, saying not really.
"Parle Inglese,"
Vincent asked. "Yeah, I can speak some English. So can she," gesturing over to Delia, hoping that if this well-dressed man was interested in him, he could use a picture as well. "You do?" the Roten man exclaimed.
"Excelente, excelente, molto bene,"
which translates to excellent, excellent, very good.
"My name is Vincent Gambino, a business entrepreneur and self-claimed financial mogul."
He took a massive drag from his cigar.
"I've been around these docks all day, and I was just about to give up hope. I'm glad you came over here."
Eustice bowed his head, then asked the question, "But what made you stop?"
"Ha!"
Vincent laughed.
"Nothing in particular. We were on our way back to the car and just thought, what the hell, what's one more stop? I take it you're looking for some work, no?"
"Yes, of course, anything really, but I think we're expecting a child, so I'm looking for something that maybe pays a little more than standard dock work," Eustice said, not considering the potential responses he could have garnered.
"Is that so?"
Vincent plucks the cigar from his mouth and sizes up beautiful young Delia from head to toe.
"And what about her? Does she have any talents?"
"Yeah, she can speak English, even write really good. She's the best person I know with numbers, really good at math," Eustice muttered out in broken sentences.
"Really?"
Vincent stopped checking her out and looked her dead in the eye.
"Okay, this will work perfectly."
He told them to grab their stuff, which was no more than 3 suitcases, and led them back to the car, which was the nicest car either of them have ever laid their eyes on. They drove around for a while. Vincent asked the two of them a bunch of questions.
"Where are you from? Where are you in America? Any special talents? Any family? Do they have any Italiano in them?"
A bunch of questions, one right after the other. Eustice was so happy to have a potential opportunity that he never even realized what was going on. Delia realized right away that the car was circling the same block for most of the ride. This was likely to buy Vincent time while he shot off his seemingly endless line of questions. Chances are this was his way of vetting them and making sure they were people he felt safe working with. When you're in the Mafia, you have to make smart decisions because a bad one could be your last. Even though his knowledge was not yet evident to Eustice and Delia, the love-struck pair was eventually invited into the basement of a massive hotel. How crazy, Eustice thought.
It was his first day riding on a cargo ship, his first day riding in fancy American cars, and now he was experienced the first time in a massive luxury hotel. They all talked a little bit more and met some other people before whisked off to a small loft apartment 2 blocks away. While the apartment was small, it was very nice. New fixtures, freshly painted walls, fancy rugs, brilliant hardwood floors, and above all, it was extraordinarily clean. They did not know what they did to deserve this place, as the only thing they were told was everything was taken care of, and Vincent would send a guy around to pick up Eustice when it was time to square things up. It just happened. It only took 4 days for that time to come, and even though Eustice nor Delia had any clue what was going to happen, Eustice was excited to go make that money. It was 4:45 a.m. when they got a knock on the door.
Eustace Williams.
A man wearing dark black suit and gloves stood there with a cold expression on his face.
Yes, sir?
Eustace shakily answered. Vincent says it's time. Put on some dark clothes, throw on your boots, grab a hat, meet me in the black car around in 10 minutes. Yes, sir. What about her? Should she come alone? The man interrupted. Hey, 10 minutes. What happened next happened fast. About an hour before sunrise, Eustice rode with the man who picked him up, and 2 other guys who sat quietly in the back of the car. Everyone was wearing black and clutchy hats as they drove calmly through the dark streets of New York. Did Vinny tell you about the Valentinos? The man asked without taking his eyes off the road. The Valentinos? Eustice asked. No, he didn't. Well, the Valentinos are another family here in New York. They're small time, about half the size of the Gambino family.
Yeah, they wish they were half as good as us, too.
One of the men chimed in from the back seat.
Yeah, they took some things that don't belong to them.
The driver continued. And I'm guessing we're going to take them back? Eustice answered. The man looked over at Eustice and smiled softly. Yeah, that's precisely what we're going to do, Eustice. You're smarter than you seem, Mr. Williams. I'm simple, but I'm not dumb, he replied. Moments later, they pulled up into a bar and it was packed with nice-looking cars. There had to be at least a dozen or so parked out front. They pulled into an empty lot across the street and turned the engine and lights off. The sound of guns being loaded filled the inside of the car, and this is when it hit old Eustice. What the hell was he doing here? He asked himself. You know how to shoot a gun? The man handed him a Model 1920 and opened the door. It was too late to second-guess anything now. Instinct began to take over, and Eustice just followed his intuition. Hey, we're going in downstairs to claim what's ours. Once you hear the fun begin, you go upstairs, find your way to the master bedroom. Hopefully, what we're looking at's still there. The man instructed. Everyone ran off, and seconds later, gunshots erupted from the cellar at the bar. Without thinking twice about it, Eustice ran up to the stairs and came to a big wooden door. He tried to open it, but it was locked. The gunfire below continued to echo through the halls, as instinct once again took over, prompting him to fire a shot down to the doorknob, successfully breaking it and allowing him to gain entry to the room. He was shocked to find 2 young women kneeling behind a bed. Please don't hurt us, the one muttered in English as the gunfire ceased. Por favor, ayúdame. Please help us, the other said. Hurt you? He asked. It was at this time the man who drove them entered the room. Fajia, he yelled, as the girl jumped up and ran to him. It was the daughter. Papa, she shrieked. By this time, the instinct that was driving Eustice was starting to run dry, and logic and reason started to flow back to his brain. What did he just do? What was he a part of? What the hell is going on? However, before he could make any sense of these questions, police sirens permitted the night air. It's the boys in blues. We need to go now. One of the other guys they arrived with poked his head into the room, saying, "The other girls got up from behind the bar and ran to the closet." As she opened it, 2 young boys under the age of 10 stepped out. "Let's go," she yelled. "Efflet Darcy!" "Hurry." As everyone ran to the bar, Eustice was last in line. As he was making his way down the steps, he was tackled out of nowhere by an injured member of the Valentino family. By the time the other guys from Gambino turned to see he was not behind them, it was too late, and cops had surrounded the area. The driver, the 2 other men, the 2 young women, and the 2 young boys all escaped, but poor Eustice was arrested. And to make matters worse, the Valentino guy survived and knew my grandfather's face. A few days went by and Delia thought Eustice was surely dead. She cried endlessly and did not sleep more than an hour or 2 for 4 days straight before finally passing out. When she woke up, she was shocked to find out that she was in her bed and Eustice was sitting beside her waiting for her to come to her senses. Turns out, those Valentino guys kidnapped those kids right off of a ship a week or so ago, and they were related to a member of the Gambino house. They initially planned for Eustice to be the fall guy and shall anything go wrong, as it did, but Vincent had a change of heart and pulled some strings to get Eustice released. The only catch was, since the Valentinos knew who he was, coupled with the fact that he and Delia were currently living a few blocks from their territory, Vincent opted to relocate them to a nice farm in Colorado. This was also part of the payment for the job, but it came with a catch. This farm produced tons of crops, which served as a cover business for some illegal Gambino house businesses. But even cover businesses need people to run them. Grandma said he got into some stuff while in Colorado too, but that's a story for a different time. By the time he passed away, Gambino, as well as the Valentino families, were all but eradicated. Once nobody could claim legal ownership of the land, it fell back to the bank and the rest was history.
I can only imagine all the stories that are floating around from the 1920s, 1930s, heck, even before then. Honestly, it's my favorite type of stories to read because it was like the wild, wild west. Let me know if any of you guys have any stories from grandfathers, great-grandpas, stories in the family, whatever. I love reading them and I would love for you to share them. I hope you enjoyed this. We still have one more story on the day. It's a completely different topic, but it's a good story. Here we go, the final story of the day. I'm a 30-year-old female and live with my husband and my pets. Unfortunately, both me and my hubby are infertile. Me endo and him with sperm issues. So, no kids. Instead, we help out with my brother and sister-in-law's kids instead. 4 female and 1 female. I'm a freelance web developer, but I work remotely from home, and the timing is very flexible, hence why I'm able to divert more care towards my nieces. My brother and sister-in-law make just about enough to cut even and can't exactly afford exorbitant childcare costs, and would rather allocate their funds to the kids' medical and school fees. I've been babysitting these children ever since the oldest was born, and now I also care for the younger one. However, recently something really dreadful happened, that is, I lost one of my closest friends, and in a really terrible way, and don't want to give too much details into it. I've been in a really bad place since then, and the whole emotional fatigue has made me not even want to attend work, which is why I specifically took a 2-week leave to rest and come to terms with my emotions. Sadly, my brother, feigning sympathy at first, said, "Get some rest," and then did the exact opposite by dropping off my nieces when I specifically told him I need this time for myself. He and sister-in-law then countered, saying that looking at my nieces would help me take my mind off things, and that it was too short of a notice. The thing is, I barely have any energy usually when the kids are over. I also take charge of the cooking, cleaning up after the younger one. The older niece is now having June's holes as compared to before,
when she'd just be at preschool. So now I have to attend to them simultaneously. I have no such energy to look after them like that. As of now, I barely can attend to my own needs. It is also a safety issue. Kids need constant monitoring, especially with my younger niece. Now, my brother and sister-in-law are threatening me, saying that if I'm not willing to babysit for the next 2 weeks, I should refund them monetarily so that they can find childcare because of the quote, short notice. I don't understand. Was I supposed to predict my friend's demise or something? Looks like my only option is to pay them back monetarily for the childcare costs to lay them off my back. My husband thinks it's cruel of them to make me pay, but my brother says I'm being selfish and only thinking everything revolves around my problems. I'm really torn and burned out from all this. I just need a break. I did lash out at them for calling me selfish and have yet to apologize. Do provide judgment on if they're fair. If so, I'd be willing to compensate them. Oh yeah, and sorry for not including in the post. I do not get paid to watch my nieces. I volunteered since my first niece was born, because of my flexible hours.
Wait. I just have to get this straight. OP has been babysitting for 4 years, has not gotten any compensation doing it out of the kindness of OP's heart, and now OP is asking for a small 2-week break because someone she knows died. What does she get meet with? Absolute vengeance. And now her brother is claiming she owes them money? This is a wild story, guys. Let me know what you thought about this in the comment section down below. Obviously, my opinion is not the a-hole. I hope you guys enjoyed the stories. If you did, smash that like button. I'll see you guys tomorrow.